I think that's what really like grounds me in why this work is important, because I want more people to be able to live like you're living, right? Where you get to decide where are you going to go and what are you going to do that day? How are you going to live? Who do you work with? I just think that's so important that we have that.
Hi, I'm Kim Tolson and I'm the traveling therapist. It's my passion to teach therapists how to navigate online private practices and multiple income streams so they can travel the world. I'm a digital nomad with a virtual insurance-based private therapy practice and a multi-six-figure coaching business. I'm obsessed with entrepreneurship and developing tools that can help therapists live an adventurous lifestyle. In this podcast, I will discuss my journey as a digital nomad. I'll chat with other traveling therapists and help you navigate the complexities of running an online insurance-based practice. I'm so glad to have you with me on this journey. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Traveling Therapist Podcast. I'm so excited to have Kaci Schmitt with us here today. She is a therapist, but also an expert in financial literacy. So I was talking to Kaci, and we thought it would be amazing to have her on here to talk about, one, being a therapist, but also this financial piece around just retirement, saving to travel, how to become a traveling therapist and plan for it if that's what you need to do. So I'm so excited to have you here, Kaci. I'd love if you would introduce yourself and just talk about both pieces that you have going on, because you're doing the therapist thing and the coaching piece. So I'd like to just talk about that and just let everybody know about you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on here, Kim. I'm so excited to be here and talk with your audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in one part of my life, I am a therapist in private practice. I love being a therapist, and I have no intention to retire early, although I am going to talk with your audience about strategies where you can retire early and be work optional, or you can work part-time. But I love what I do, but I also really have this passion for financial literacy. And particularly, it's funny, I never was really all that interested in money to begin with.
Uh-huh.
Just as a younger person, it was never something that really motivated me. But what got me really into it, which is why I created my second business called Invested Therapist, is what it can actually do for us. It can help us live lives of, autonomy, and where we have a lot more choice and independence, which I think just goes so hand in hand with being a traveling therapist.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's the number one thing. Well, there's a couple things: kids, pets, and money.
Yeah. Yes.
How do I do this? How do I manage this? So I try to help with that, but I think it's so important to have somebody like you that really, has a step-by-step process and can walk through people through how do I do this, especially if there's like money mindset blocks, or I
Yes.
never learned how to budget, or my parents were
Mhm.
terrible with money. There's all these things that go into it. So I'm so glad to have you here talking about this. Thank you.
Yeah.
So where should we start? Like, what do you think the audience should know if they're like, gosh, okay, I want to be a traveling therapist. I really don't have the money for this. Like, where do we start?
Absolutely. Where do we start? I mean, I think it's really important. There's so much that goes into money, right? We've got all of our money stories that we have been cultivating since way before we got our first jobs, because we're watching our parents or our guardians and how they talk about money, and what opportunities we saw them have or not have, and what we had or didn't have compared to kids in our class when we were in elementary school, right? So, I think it's really important to be able to evaluate your relationship with money and how that's shown up in your past, but also how that shows up in your future, right? What
Yeah.
stories do you have about money? What beliefs do you have about your ability to generate money? And I think, for a lot of us, I imagine a lot of your audience is therapists in private practice, but you
Mhm.
might also have some people who are working in W-2 jobs right now, right? And that's
Absolutely.
right. It's so different. I've done both. I'm currently only a self-employed person, so working with my own private practice, but then with my second business, Invested Therapist. But I've been W-2 employed for most of my life
Mhm.
before doing this. And I think that before we get into self-employment, we can often have a lot of limitation, like limited ideas about how much money we can bring in. So
Mhm.
I just think there's so much we can cover in terms of like exploring, what our stories are about money and our beliefs, but also there's some really practical things we can do too, right? So I don't
Mm.
know if there's like certain aspects of maybe the practical things that we
I
could
would
cover here
love
too.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that because, yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're exactly right. First, you have to get past that money mindset stuff, and then you have to
Yeah.
really assess, I would imagine, like, okay, what do I have coming in? Do I have vacation time? How
Right.
do I have too many expenses? How can I start setting money aside? So I think, yeah, practical tips that you have around this that would help people get started would be amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple of ideas that came to mind for me as I was thinking about, if you have an audience who is thinking about becoming a traveling therapist and thinking about how can I actually bring this into my life in a way that's really, as smooth as possible, as easy for them as possible. Two things come to mind automatically. The first being sinking funds. Have you heard of sinking funds before, Kim? Or do you
Oh,
use
tell
them?
me about this. Yeah.
Ah,
No.
so it's just a really great way to organize your money. So
Okay.
for many of us, before we hear about sinking funds or kind of dive into financial literacy more, we think about it like, okay, we have our checking and we have our savings, right? And
Mhm.
whatever your relationship is with them, it's different for every person. And that can be for your personal accounts and also your business accounts.
Mhm.
Sinking funds are specific funds designated for different parts of your life, right? So we can have a fund that is just saving up for travel or just saving up for pet expenses. Or personally, one sinking fund I like to tell my audience about is that I am getting I'm having a tattoo removed, and it is
Oh,
a
yeah.
very long, extensive process, an expensive process, I should add. And so I set aside money just for that because to me, the only pain I want to experience is like the pain going in of actually doing it. But I've
Yeah.
I've got this fund that says, yep, this is what this money is going to. So it's meant to be used in a way that actually, and of course, this is, you know, my own example here, right? But like with travel, it's
Yeah.
it's meant to be used in a way that enriches your life. So there are lots of different ways we can set these up. You can have separate savings accounts in your online bank, and you can give them a label, and you can decide how much you want to send to each account every month that will help support your overall goals, whatever those are. You can also, some banks give you like little buckets that you can put the money in and just label in the same account. But that's one idea that I have is just being able to organize your money and know, like, no guilt. This is exactly what it's for with
Yeah.
your sinking fund. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I've never heard that term before, but, I do something similar, and once you
Yeah.
designate it and it's gone, you don't even
Yes.
think about it. At least I don't. I'm like, "Okay," it just deducts and it's gone, and it's like
Totally.
like my IRA contributions, it just goes, You
Yes.
don't
Yep.
you don't really think much about it, at least I don't. Yeah, so I love that.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah. And speaking of IRA contributions, another, and this is kind of a longer term thing to think about, but
Okay.
I really think that it's so important that we really cultivate empathy for our future selves. So
Mhm.
even if this is a more long-term strategy, man, are you going to like love yourself 5 to 7 or 10 years from now when you have this money that's here for you? And I say it's long term because the next suggestion I have is to set aside money in investing accounts just for life goals, right? And so your IRA, for example, we have two main types of investing accounts. We have tax advantaged accounts like retirement accounts, such as an IRA. Solo 401k is another example. You can have traditional or a Roth IRA or a SEP IRA. Lots of different types of accounts here that have specific tax advantages. And then we also have accounts they're often referred to as individual brokerage accounts. They don't have a tax advantage, but they don't have limitations like tax advantaged accounts do. And you can take the money out at any point in time. You just have to pay taxes on it, but
Yeah.
it's taxes on the growth, not taxes on the actual money, the contributions totally.
Right.
So I say it's a longer term strategy because
Mm.
let's say you're putting money into this account and then you decide, I want to start my travels in February 2022, and you've been investing this money. Well, if anybody in your audience has been paying attention to what's been going on in the stock market,
Right.
right around January, things started to dip and they're they're coming back, right? But
Yeah.
if and it what's great is that your money, when the stock market does start to dip, buys you more shares of things that are going to generate money for you in the future. But if you
Mhm.
need it right then and there, you have to sell at a loss. And so that's what we don't want to do. We want to think about, how can I, have this 7-year, 10-year, 20-year plan for this money so it
Mhm.
has time to grow and recover if there are dips.
Absolutely. Yes. Yep. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's so important. Yeah, my stocks have tanked. I think
totally.
everybody's has.
They
I'm like,
have,
okay,
they
it's
have.
coming back now. Now I'm
Yes.
investing, lower with the lower prices and hoping it's just going to be like a huge return. But it is a gamble, and you have to know it won't be like you can't use it for short term type goals like you're talking.
Exactly. Right, right. In the short term, it's definitely it's a risk if you're planning on using the money in the short term to put it in investment accounts, but over a long enough period of time, and this is what got me really interested in investing in the first place. Over a long enough period of time, and I'm talking like beyond 7 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 30, a long enough period of time, on average, the stock market returns about 10% annually. And that's including the fact that we have some years, like I think I checked this morning, and year to date, as of the day we're recording this, stock market, the US stock market is down about 13%.
Mm.
Now, by the time this comes out, that's going to shift, but the stock market may be down right now, but in some years it's going to end down, and some it's going to be up 25%. But over a long enough period of time, it yields about 10% annually on average. And that actually includes, and I love telling people this part because it's kind of mind blowing, that includes the Great Depression, that
Uh,
includes the Great Recession. So that includes any long enough period of time, like 10 years around those gigantic catastrophic events. That's how it's often described by financial experts investing in the stock market as, you've got a yo-yo, and so the yo-yo is going up and down, but you're walking upstairs, right? And so the stairs, they're taking you somewhere different, but in the short term it's like a yo-yo going up and down. We don't really know day to day.
oh, exactly. Yeah, that's such a good analogy. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So do you feel like those are your two biggest sort of strategies right now, or are there any other practical advice type things you wanted to share around that?
I think these are the two main ones in terms of thinking about setting aside money in the short term, because your cash that you're keeping in these sinking funds, we know that it's going to be chipped away by inflation, but we know it's going to be secure compared to if you're investing money in these longer term accounts, right?
Yeah,
So it's always a risk to have, quote unquote, too much in cash. In other words, not investing, right? Because inflation is going to take some of the value of your dollars away, but it's much more secure, right? So we want to have a balance of both. And of course, there's definitely that deeper dive work of understanding, what money is to you and what you want to use it for, and getting really clear on your values around money, right? But I think we can do these things in tandem as we think about these really specific strategies to help us get where we want to be.
absolutely. Yeah, so important. I'm so glad to have you on and have people hearing this. It's just
Yeah.
so important. It really is. So before we hit record, I can't remember the acronym, but we were talking about
Yeah.
retiring when you're ready. Will you share about
Yes,
that?
I
Okay.
will. I would love to. So the acronym that I shared with Kim, it's the FIRE movement, FIRE, and it's a very loose collective of people. There are lots of bloggers, YouTubers, podcasters, and honestly, just people in real life who aren't sharing this publicly, but are using these strategies. And what it stands for is financial independence, retire early. And what's interesting about, so basically it's a when people adhere to principles in the fire movement, which I personally consider myself as someone who is adhering to these principles. The idea is that at a certain point in time, whatever you designate, as you kind of reverse engineer your life and decide, okay, at what point in time do I want to be work optional? And for
Mhm.
me, I was telling Kim, I really don't have plans to retire at like a certain age, because I mean, of course, I want to be able to retire at traditional retirement age, but I really love what I do, but I really have specific plans to be work optional because I know that life gets in the way sometimes. I also know that when we're work optional, it just gives us a sense of choice, autonomy, relief, knowing that you actually can say no to a lot of things. You can say no to working full-time hours. You can say no to, like, you just have a lot more clarity, right, about the work that you're doing. So
Mhm.
basically people who consider themselves to be part of this financial independence, retire early movement, save and invest a lot more than what traditional advice will give you, which is usually something like 15% of your money. And you can totally use an investment calculator and find out what works for you.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, especially depending on when we get started investing, that might not be even enough for retirement. So
Right.
it's just really helpful in terms of creating a life where you just have more choices, which I'm all about. That's what it means for me.
Oh, me too. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've never heard it put that way, work optional, but I feel grateful that I've been able to put myself in that
Yeah.
situation, with
Yes.
developing, multiple income streams. I still
Yes.
see some clients, but not that many,
Yep.
and literally every day we say, my boyfriend and I, we say, God, we feel like we're retired already, because
Yes.
we can, we have saved, we are smart with investments, but, developing all these different income streams has helped me have, it's not necessarily passive income, but it's helped me have just an influx of money coming in.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I might launch a course over here, or I might have just like, my standalone insurance billing course that I sell, and people just
Mhm.
randomly buy that, and it's just so constant money coming in. So we can just go do whatever we want. We don't have to just
Yeah.
sit attached to our computer all day, every day, especially
Absolutely.
living as digital nomads, we just get to go do whatever we want to, every day.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
amazing.
It is.
Hi, folks. Gordon Brewer here. And if you don't know me yet, I'm the person behind the Practice of Therapy podcast, which is part of the Sightcraft network of podcasts. And I'm so proud to be part of this network along with Kim and the Traveling Therapist podcast and the great work she is doing to help people in their journeys. And if you haven't discovered the Practice of Therapy podcast yet, you can find us wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I'd love for you to join us as we explore the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. And be sure to check us out at practiceoftherapy.com for all the great resources and free webinars to help you in your own private practice journey.
I truly just want that for as many people who want that too, right? And I think there's so many ways that we can do that. And I totally hear you. I think it sounds exactly like you are kind of already living this really work optional lifestyle because you've set up your work to be able to support you very similarly to how, like, when we invest and we're either doing a safe amount that we can withdraw every year without the investments depleting, right? Where they're still growing, or, having dividends as an income stream, for example, right? Like I just think it's so important, especially for people. One thing that really stands out to me is it wasn't until the 1970s, and there's so many inequities in the financial space in terms of opportunities and all of that. Many,
Absolutely.
many, many people have not had the opportunities that they truly deserved. And it wasn't until the 1970s that as women, we were able to have our own access to bank accounts and lines of credit without a male cosigner. And to me, it's like, oh my gosh, I know. I was born the next decade. I was born in the 1980s.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind how that is something, had we just been born in a different time period, right? And of course, there's still so many inequities, but like,
Yeah.
I think that's what really like grounds me in why this work is important, because I want more people to be able to live like you're living, right? Where you get to
Yes.
decide where are you going to go and what are you going to do that day? How are you going to live? Who do you work with? I just think that's so important that we have that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And recently I released the Expert's Guide to Becoming a Traveling Therapist, and I really went back and forth with like, should I include this multiple income stream stuff? But I was like,
Yeah.
yes, I
Yes.
have to. I have to do pieces on that so people can understand, like, okay, yeah, you can travel, you can do anything, and you can like literally enjoy these places while you're there. You don't have to just
Yes.
like, pop in, do everything in a weekend and then go back home and go to work. Like it can
Right.
be flexible, location independent, I mean, it's
Absolutely.
I love it. So yeah, I had to decide if I should even put that in there, but I did because I wanted people to know, this stuff you're talking
Yes.
about. Like you can plan to live this lifestyle if that's what you want to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you did your audience such a like that is just such a generous offer to explain, how you got to the place where you've been able to do that, right? Because I also really believe, we of course everyone gets to make their own decisions about, what their business offerings are and how they want to work, but if you have something in you that is saying, I really have this message I want to share, or I have something I want to teach, or and there's so many different ways we can do that, and it doesn't have to mean just working one-on-one with
Yeah.
clients.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
absolutely. Yes, yes.
So this feels like when you're just talking about a calling and getting your message out, if you feel this deep
Yeah,
need to get this message out to people. So it sounds like this is your mission with the financial piece. So I'm just wondering,
yeah.
like, how are you helping? Is it just clinicians, or is it anybody that's trying to work on their financial relationship? How are you putting that offer out into the world?
Totally. Yes. Well, so in the fall, I will be launching a monthly membership called the Financial Self-Care Membership. And it is primarily it's going to be most beneficial for therapists. However, there are going to be a lot of things that we cover. While there will be things specific for therapists, I'm going to be covering money mindset stuff, saving, investing, and a lot of it, really will be applicable for people other than therapists. But I'm a therapist in private practice myself, and so
Right.
I also know that things like, setting our fees, raising those fees, being really intentional about how we do pro bono or sliding scale work, and how we can support ourselves to maybe have more of those offerings, right? If we take care of our finances in a certain way, in a really intentional way, can be really specific to those of us working in private practice, or who want to work in private practice but feel like, I don't know. And I have to tell you too, Kim, another thing that got me just really interested in this is, I hear both from therapists but also from like there was a director who posted in a local Facebook group that I'm a part of, and this person was saying, I just don't understand why we can't get anyone applying for our agency. We have a 401k and it's doing really great. And if you don't know better, right, you think, oh, well, this is where I have to go work at this agency paying $25, $30 an hour because they have a 401k. And that's just not how it needs to be,
Oh
right?
my gosh. Right.
Yeah. So I want to work with therapists around this money mindset stuff and really teaching intentional strategies for saving and investing and paying off debt with the monthly membership. It'll be launching in the fall. And I actually have a Facebook group that I
Okay.
just got started within the last month. Like less than a month is when I really started letting people know about it. It's already pretty active, and it's called the Financial Self-Care for Therapists. So you can just do a search on Facebook for it if anyone's interested in joining.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So,
Oh,
I was gonna say, so we'll definitely put all the links to
yeah,
this show notes too, if anybody wants to
yes,
to find out more about Casey and what she has to offer. Yeah. I'm excited for
absolutely.
this. I think it's amazing.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
One thing that people can do is they can go to my website at investedtherapist.co/calculator, because I've created a free investing calculator
Okay.
just for therapists to be able to input your information. You can, you put in, it's all tailored to you and no one else has access to it. So it's yours to keep forever. And you can put in how much you currently have in investments, how many years you plan to work and invest before you retire, and how much you plan to invest monthly. And you can play around with the numbers to see, okay, if I invest $500 a month at an 8% annual rate of return, and you can modify that as well, about what would I get 20 years from now? And just play around to see, am I going to be able to live off of X amount 20 years from now, or do I need to adjust my strategy a little bit? Or can I even bring it down if you're investing so much that you're not living your life in the present, right? Then you can see, how can I use this calculator to help me decide how to balance those present needs and desires with investing for your future, your long term.
Yeah, I like that. Even having some balance in there because
Yeah.
I have heard stories about people going the other way. I never knew it was called the FIRE movement, but people
Yeah.
like early, like in their 20s, like just like
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting it all in now. Like I'm going to work, save, work, and then I'll be able to retire 40, But
Yes.
I think there does have to be a balance in there. Like, okay, but are you going to
Totally.
enjoy your life at all? Like, how are you going to do this? Like trying to
Totally.
find that balance. Hmm.
Oh, it's so important, right? Like I always talk about, I think we need to have empathy both for our future selves, which sometimes there can be, until we really intentionally cultivate that, there can be a little bit of a disconnect of like, oh, I'll put that off. I'll handle that, when things calm down for me, or when I'm, 5 years from now or whatever, especially if we're younger and think it, can't imagine being 65, right? Yeah. Totally, totally. So it's so important to have that empathy for our future selves, but also, like you're saying, in the present too, right? Because
Mhm.
none of us know. None of us know how much
That's right.
time we have, like coming from an existential perspective, right? Like we
Hmm.
don't know. And it's so important just to have that balance of living really intentionally in the present and just saving up for that future self who just is going to thank you so much for, for taking care of that
Yeah,
person.
absolutely. Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing all this. I
Of
really
course.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Oh,
Is there
absolutely.
is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you want to say, or do you think that's pretty much a good summary of what we need to think about with this financial piece?
I think what I just really want to encourage everyone listening to think about is the fact that, we can have a lot of shame around money, around our history or our present with money. And it's so, so important that we cultivate compassion for wherever we are. And no matter where we are, we can always come up with a plan for 1 month from now, 6 months from now, a year, 5 years to be so much better than where we are. Right. And it's just so important to have that compassion for everything that you have struggled with and that you currently are, and just to know that we can be really strategic, right? It doesn't matter, like a lot of the people that I work with are in their 20s and 30s,
Mhm.
and and that's great, right? Because they're theoretically, right, like we have all these decades to be able to save and invest, and it's great to start that young. And I work with people who are older and who think, gosh, like I wish I had started when I was in my early 20s, right? And it means we have to be strategic, right? If you're coming at it from the perspective that, you may have fewer decades for your money to grow, that's
Mhm.
okay. Wherever you are, we can meet you there. And I believe it's truly, truly never too late, to be really intentional with where we want our money to go and how it can support us living the lives we want to live.
Absolutely. Ah, I love that.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. It's been
of
so great to have
course.
you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to talk with you. I think both you and I are very aligned with missions to help people see that they can be really intentional about creating the life they want and the practice that they want, right? Whatever that looks like.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yep, for sure. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to the Traveling Therapist podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to thetravelingtherapist.com, where you'll be able to learn more about my journey, the courses I've created for you, and other exciting resources to make your dreams become a reality. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your traveling therapist friends, subscribe to the podcast, and if you loved this episode, please leave a review.